Hello, everybody. Welcome to another conversation with Jason and Justin. Today, we are joined by Gary Jones, who did some special effects, costume stuff for Evil Dead. I can't wait to talk to him about that. He's got a new movie that's coming out, and I can't wait to talk to him about that. Escape from Death Block 13. So, lots to talk to you about. But the first question I want to ask you, Gary, because I'm looking at your IMDb page, and a lot of people don't realize this, and I had known this prior, and that is that like you've done special effects for like Hallmark Christmas movies and Lifetime Christmas movies. A lot of people don't know that those movies have special effects. Like what's the work that goes into those?
Well, mostly the Hallmark stuff's kind of interesting because you'll notice there's a lot of winter or snow movies, right? With all the atmosphere and stuff. So typically they'll shoot them. A lot of times they'll shoot them like in Utah or wherever or down south, and they'll put out the fake snow. They'll like put the blankets out, or they'll put things. But there's a lot of wide shots where they would hire me to like put snow in the background, or sometimes like they'd have a house and they'd cover, they have the snow blankets, right? And sometimes they wrinkle a bit. So like, oh, take the wrinkles out. So typically I'm adding snow everywhere or falling snow for wherever they want it. That's sort of been the mainstay was the snow effects. And then a lot of computer comps, cell phone comps, TV comps. We had one I did where we had they had a whole downtown that was supposed to be all lit up. And, they put out some practicals and stuff. But for the wide shots, I put Christmas lights all up and down the buildings, and all kinds of stuff like, millions of dollars worth of Christmas lights on the buildings, all CG. And I really like those kind of effects. It's usually the stuff you don't notice, like if you watch a Marvel movie or something, right? Obviously, what you're looking at is all special effects, right? I mean, there's kind of like there's a person there, sometimes or a chair. And, those kind of effects are great, but, that's pretty, that's a lot of work and, hundreds of people working on them to get them to look good. I like that stuff, but I really like special effects that you don't kind of notice. And in a lot of those Hallmark and Christmas movies, the Lifetime movies, it's a lot of subtle stuff, or like you'll see the camera crew in the window, or the car pulls up and you'll have reflections of the crew in it. And I take a lot of that stuff out. A lot of fixes, always see a light in the background, or I had one where someone was wearing glasses like this, and every time they leaned up, it blurred out. Yeah. And so I was going in there and tracking and putting the eyes back in and things like that. So a lot of stuff you wouldn't really notice, mostly in the Hallmark movies.
That's amazing.
So this conversation brought up a question I didn't think to ask, but what's the hardest thing to buff out, like in a movie? Like, what's the hardest thing to kind of tweak or just get right in the CGI kind of aspect or the special effects world?
Well, I've done a wide variety of stuff, and in my movie, Escape from Death Block 13, it's a big action movie, and there's a lot of guns and squibs and pyrotechnics, and a lot of things where we had like, we'll have like 20 or 30 people on set, and we want to make it look like there's 150 people. So I would take and kind of double and triple the people, change costumes, move them around to make it look like we have, 150 people on set. Some of the hardest stuff that I've had to tackle is doing squib work on people when they're being shot, Okay. On my movies, what I try to do is if someone gets shot in the forehead, I like to put the makeup effect there and then clean it up and reveal it, right? Same with a bullet hole. But some of the tougher ones are the close-up stuff when someone gets shot and you have to do a squib hit or a bullet hit. And I don't do digital blood, it's not created digitally. All the elements I like to use are elements either I've shot or elements that I purchased. They're actually real liquid elements and smoke elements and stuff and clothes. A lot of times I'll shoot stuff in front of green screen, and light it to kind of wait for it to match. So it's really kind of layering and compositing that stuff. And then guns too, gunfires, and, the chamber opens, the shell flies out. There's a muzzle break, a muzzle flash on the actor's face, the hand. There's always extra sparks or smoke that lingers. So it's really kind of getting those things right. I mean, I love all those little details, but the toughest stuff is like in this movie, we had a prison. We had the Shawshank prison, and we shot it there. Well, since the Shawshank movie, they've torn down all the backyard of the prison. So we have drone shots flying into the prison and going up, Well, in the Shawshank Redemption, they have a helicopter shot that goes up over and you see all the cell blocks and all the, the little work farm in the back and the yard all fenced in and the big wall. All that is gone now. It's all been torn down, and now it's like brand new prisons back there. Huh. And they don't want you to shoot those. You can't show those. So we did drone shots where we flew to the prison and we were flying up over it, and we had to recreate that whole back digitally and put it in. And that was tough on this movie, because I wanted that iconic shot or two, like people go, it's the Shawshank prison, right? Mm-hmm. You know what they want to see, right? They want that camera to go in and go up over. And so we did that where we came in up and over, and, we rebuilt the whole back. That was very tough, but I think it turned out pretty well. And we have our helicopters flying over and stuff. So
that's incredible. Tell us more about your movie. Like that poster behind you, sweet. That thing is huge.
That's it's one of our bigger posters. We use that for the screenings and stuff. It's called Escape from Death Block 13, and it's really an homage to the movies of the 70s that I loved. That was my golden era growing up in the 70s and watching, obviously, Mr. Majestic, Death Wish, The Getaway, The Longest Yard, and all the Eastwood movies. But it's really that love of that genre from the 70s and early 80s. And those movies were about something else, they weren't about technology. It was about a code of honor, a handshake deal is your word. If someone owes you $1, they pay it. If they don't pay it, there's a price to pay. So I wanted to get away from, I didn't want to make a movie that had anything to do with technology because, it's too easy, right? A cell phone, you can see everything, go anywhere. That's all bullshit. There's kind of no new, the territory there is really rough to deal in. So I want to do a throwback to the good old fashioned things where it's a code of honor movie. And so it's a bit of my homage back to the movies I grew up with. And it's an action movie, and it's like the kind of stuff I love, prison escapes, and Breakout with Charles Bronson, and Escape from Alcatraz, and a couple of movies influenced me here. Going back to there was a new one called Brawl in Cell Block 99, starring Vince Vaughn. Craig Zeller did it. Mm-hmm. That's a real. I love his movies, and I love that what he did with that because it's a real throwback, to those movies they just don't make anymore, So I wanted to do movies I wanted a movie be like that. So that was a big influence. And then, Longest Yard and, all the Don Siegel movies, Robert Aldrich movies. There was like tough guy movies, and they had these actors, right? It's like another one favorite was Emperor of the North Pole. And it's got Lee Marvin and Ernest Borgnine, and they're on a flatbed train, and they're fighting on a moving train with chains and 4x4s and ball peen hammers. And I miss that stuff, because we have stars today, but it's hard to find those grisly, like matinee stars, the guys that have some, mileage on them. I really like what Liam Neeson is doing with the Taken movies. I love the fact that he's older, but he's like the action guy, You got Keanu Reeves over here, but then you got Liam Neeson. You're like, that's really cool because that's what I grew up with, So that was what I wanted to do, an homage to those movies. And when I met Robert Bronzi, and I'm like, it's like Charles Bronson, and I was like, man, this is great because I have him in this movie, and it instantly can transport people back to those Charles Bronson movies they loved, which means you're going back to the 70s and the 80s, right?
I saw the poster and I'm like, Charles Bronson's not with us anymore. I'm like, who is this guy? So then I IMDb'd it, and no, definitely.
There he is, right there. Yeah, Robert Bronzi, and he's a Hungarian actor, and he was doing Wild West shows out in Spain and Italy. They have all the movie ranches, where Clint Eastwood shot the spaghetti westerns. Well, they do Wild West shows like we do in Tombstone, right? Yeah. And they get all the Europeans would go there, and Robert would play a sheriff. He'd come riding in on a horse, and instantly everybody's like transported back to that time, And so that's kind of where he got his start, was doing that. And then a fellow filmmaker friend of mine in California saw that and brought him out, and they decided they were going to do this movie called Death Kiss, which is like a ripoff of Death Wish, Yeah. Yep. And he sent me the picture, and I was like, hey, Jeff, man, you can't do that. I mean, that's just too, that's, and I thought about it and go, man, this is kind of cool. It's like Death Kiss is a very, very low budget movie, but it wanted that, it tried to get that charm of the past. And after that, and I met Bronzy at the Texas Frightmare Film Festival. And I kind of told him about this movie I want to do, this Prison Escape. And we did a handshake deal and had a couple of drinks. Let's make 3 movies together, And then I had a script, but the character was written for a guy coming from down south up to Ohio to do this, to do this thing. And I thought, I have to have Bronzy be Bronzy. He's a Hungarian actor, so he has a thick Hungarian accent, and his English is not exactly 100%. So what I did was I went, you know what? I just rewrote it and said, this guy's coming from Hungary to collect a debt. Pure and simple.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I ran the lines with Bronzy in the bar, and he would twist lines around or drop words, how they kind of do. It's like that word would be here, this one would be here. So I just rewrote it like, okay, so Bronzy, here's the line. He'd say the line, it would be a little bit wrong, and I just change it because I wanted to make it like it was easy for him, And I think it just made the movie. It's like we're not trying to make people believe he's from somewhere else, like, oh, he's an American, just coming. No, he's not from Louisiana. And then once I did that, all kind of story points came out. I mean, he told me different things about the family name Kovacs means blacksmith. He has a hammer tattoo on his arm. And I'm like, I can use that in the movie, So I wrote a bunch of stuff in. So anyways, it just really worked out well. And once I had Bronzy on board, I'm like, okay, I got to put these people around him. And one of my good buddies, Chris Hahn, was a professional wrestler with the WWE years ago. And he used to wrestle as Johnny Paradise and as Chris Hahn. And I had worked with him on another movie. We did Axe Giant together. He was my Paul Bunyan. And I said, hey, I'm doing this movie. And I'm like, I want to get these guys. And he goes, hey, what if we get, we'll get all the wrestling guys. So he called his buddy Jimmy Lee up. And Jimmy Lee has the ASWA, which is, a local, regional wrestling team. And so I met these guys, and every one of them is a character. They're all, and I went, I got characters. They can do fights. They can do performances. They're performers. I don't need to double them for stunts. So he brought all these, 25 guys, and it just like, it opened it up, all of a sudden now I can have fight scenes and riots. I didn't have any folding chairs. I said, no, guys, no folding chairs. We're going to have guns and 2x4s and stuff. But it just opened the film up. So I tried to populate it with a lot of people around Bronzy and people to play off of. And brought in Nicholas Turturro to play a part. He has a very important part in the movie. And Lawrence Hilton Jacobs from, you guys probably know him way back from Boom Boom Washington, from Welcome Back, Kotter. And he was in Cooley High. And his first movie was Death Wish, and he gets shot by Charles Bronson in that movie. So I brought him on set, and he met Robert, and he was like, "Oh man, this is freaky." So I have a nice little homage to Death Wish in there between the two. And
that's awesome.
But no, I just rounded it out. So it was really, the package literally came together in about 3 or 4 months. From like, got this idea, about 4.5 months later, I'm making a movie.
That's awesome. You mentioned
That's great.
You mentioned Mansfield with the prison. We live in Columbus. What's it like shooting in Ohio?
Oh, I love it. I grew up in Michigan, and I made my first movie there. And once you live in a state for a while, you start to absorb and start to see all the assets that are there. Well, I had a ton of assets in Michigan, when I made my first movie. Then I lived in California for years, and then when I moved back to Michigan and then actually back to Ohio, I'm like, well, Ohio's got nothing, what's down here, and I'm like, I'm 15 minutes from that prison. Mm-hmm. So I'd drive by and go, I got to use that in a movie, and then I'd go to Mohican, State Forest. I'm like, look at these forests. This is great, and then you go to Cleveland or Columbus, and you got the cities, you got the small towns everywhere. Mm-hmm. I'm like, everything's here, these ravines and rivers. And all of a sudden I'm going, this is a backlot. I mean, there's even some sand dunes in a few spots you can use, So I'm like, wow, there's so much here, And, I came back and I started meeting people that were, wanted to make movies, and some people that different talented people like Robert Kurtzman, who had his company here. And so I met all the effects guys, we all just connected, and basically connecting with crews out of Columbus and Cleveland and locally, and a few people from California. And it's like, yeah, you can, Ohio is just phenomenal. I mean, I've got 10 other movies to make here,
Well, if you ever need some suckers to get killed in the movie, I'll do it for free.
All right. Well, I got to warn you though, you're in one of my movies. So what happens is, like, if you were in this movie, you'd be a prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
And if we didn't see a close up of you, you'd be in a guard uniform later on during the riot. You'd get so we did that a lot in the movie. So we're going to have a drinking game with this movie. Like I was telling the guys in it, I'm like, you played about 4 roles, right? I was like, so the drinking game will be pick how many times you see David Greathouse in the movie. Things like that.
That's awesome. I want to take you way back, and I want to hear about your experience getting work with a little small movie that not a lot of people saw, which was Evil Dead 2.
Mm-hmm. Evil Dead. Wow. Yeah, it's like, well, I grew up in Michigan, and I remember I had read in a newspaper that these college kids were making this movie called, at the time it was Within the Woods.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, where are they at? And they lived all the way across town from me. And I sort of lost track because, back in the day, you'd see something on TV or you'd get a newspaper article. That's it. Like, you couldn't pick up a phone, you could pick up a phone book if you try to find a name, So I sort of lost track of them. Then all of a sudden, a few years later, they're having to premiere their movie down at the Redford Theater for, Book of the Dead, Evil Dead. And I'm like, holy shit, they made that movie, and I missed out on it, So right after Evil Dead, I hunted the guys down and I hounded them. And, they were all in Ferndale, Michigan. And I went down to their office, and they're like in between movies. And I met a couple guys there, Scott Spiegel and Josh Becker, who had worked on the Evil Dead movie. They were starting their movie, which was called Strikers War. And they had no money. And I was working on the assembly line at the time. And they said, hey, you want to do effects on this? And of course, I brought in my box of stuff, rubber hammers and makeup effects and blood and guts. That's kind of how I started, with all that makeup stuff. And I was making firecracker squibs, for bullet hits and stuff, and blood bags and solar igniters, So they hired me on that movie. And so I sort of got into that mix around that group. And Sam Raimi and the guys were trying to put another movie together. They had done Crime Wave. And I had worked on that as kind of a background driving cars. And then they started up the Evil Dead 2, they actually went out of state to shoot. They shot most of it down, I think it was North Carolina. Well, they came back to Michigan to finish it off and shoot a ton of extra stuff. I had already known the guy, so I came in and I made built all those miniature trees that attacked the cabin because I was doing.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
I did pyrotechnics. We did close-ups of dead-eyed heads blowing up with det cord and gelatin. And so I came in and did a lot of incidental windows shattering as the camera goes through, a lot of little incidental stuff and all these kind of miniature effects for them. And so that's how I kind of hooked up with them. And then from there, they went off to LA. They did Darkman. And they asked me to come out and work on it. At the time, I had other stuff going on. I had a family too. So, these movies were great, but it never paid enough to quit your day job, And so then when they got Evil Dead 3 going, they called me up and they offered me a really good spot on it. I came out and I was effects foreman and, special effects props and effects foreman. And so I moved out to California for a couple months and did that and, made the mechanical hand that, with the whammo air gun thing and the death coaster. We did the rotor blades and I helped rig pyro. I mean, just, rubber spear tips and arrows, everything. And it was a blast. And so I kind of got in the mix. The one thing about those guys is every time they hired me, they paid me more money. So it was never going backwards. So, they didn't pay a lot, but they always paid more, And so I really respected that it wasn't, of course, I did twice as much work each time. So I guess it balanced out. But to me, there was that code of honor, like, hey,
some respect there.
$1 on that one, we're going to give you 10 on this one. Okay, now we're going to give you 100 because their budgets were going up too. So they're always good about that and giving me opportunities. And
what's Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi like?
It's funny if you ever see Bruce Campbell, in a convention or whatever, he's pretty much like that.
That's awesome. That's what I wanted you to
Jokes
say.
and gags, serious when he has to be, but no change. Sam was kind of different. Sam was always he was a little more reserved, and because when we're doing the work's important, and he was always trying to make it as good as possible. And if you screwed up or if you were lazy, he'd call you out on it. Hey, buddy, you dropped the ball this time. Don't do it next time. He'd never swear,
Mm-hmm.
So I always respected that it was about, and then if you did something he loved, he'd start laughing, And so it was just kind of infectious. But so working with Sam when he had very small budgets, I haven't worked with him on the bigger movies. I actually worked for him. He was an executive producer on movies. They brought me in to direct movies for them. And that relationship was great because we'd get together in pre-production. Everybody's around the table, the execs and stuff. And, we're going to talk about I did a movie called Boogeyman 3 for him. I directed that. And so we're having the big meeting there at Sony Studios. Sam comes in and the first thing he says, Gary, how you doing, pal? And we start, he starts talking about the old days. And everybody else around the table, like, what's going on? And we start talking, and he goes, so what are you going to do? How are you going to do that gag? I'm thinking of some reverse motion. Yeah, that's great. And everybody's like, what are you guys talking about? And we're like, we got it. We got it covered, But he was really good that way about just honing in on what it was. Go for it, buddy. Because he just believed. But I think the last time I saw him, he seemed a little more reserved, and he's like, I know you. It's just like, 9 million people in front of you all day, over years and years. He's like, hey, pal. So when he'd say pal, I knew he didn't really remember Gary, but he recognized me,
Yeah, he knew you. Yeah.
And that was cool. But no, they were always great. And Bruce gave me great advice. He said before I went out and made my first movie, which was Mosquito, about giant killer mosquitoes, I said, hey, Bruce, I'm going to make this movie. And I said, I want some advice. He goes, okay, here's the best advice I can give you. Don't fail. I'm like,
solid advice.
He goes, that's it. He goes, have a script you believe in and then go make it and don't stop until everybody sees it. And I kind of didn't. I thought, man, that's not really advice. Well, when I finished with the movie and I started getting it out there and I really was pushing it and I had some success with it, I'm like, what he meant was finish. It's that problem. Like, I wanted to make movies for years. And as everybody does, and I'm guilty of this, I talked about it. Oh, we're going to do this. It's going to be great. Yeah. And then we go off our own ways, and it was always a perfect experience. The movie was going to be big, but I never made it. Right. Because there's always that thing there's that fear factor of failure. And I realized what Bruce was saying was like, if you fail, you got to just keep going, because you're going to fail at stuff. And that's like a life lesson, right? It's very simple. If you knock, the door opens, right? People are afraid of failure and they don't do things, So, and I was like, didn't want to fail. So I'm like, if I fail, I'll never make it, And I'm like, well, you know what? All I can do is the best I can do and try to overload the movie to make it get noticed. So I thought giant killer mosquitoes, and it worked, because it kind of hadn't been done. So I just went over the top with giant rubber bugs and shotguns. And I got Gunnar Henson to come in there with his chainsaw, so I had Leatherface chopping up bugs with a chainsaw. So I tried to just put everything in the kitchen sink into it to say, hey, I'm here. Notice me,
Mm-hmm.
Give me a shot at something, And I realized that was the key. Find out what you do, what you can do. For years I thought I'll be like Spielberg, by the time I'm 27, all that stuff. I'll make Jaws,
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't follow anybody else. You can be inspired, but to say I'm going to have that person's career or that career, you're setting yourself up for some disappointment because what you're going to have is your career. So it took me a few years to let go, throw all that away, do your thing, And so Escape from Death Block 13, I decided a few years ago, you know what? I've been chasing this for a while and you never know if you're going to get another movie project or whatever. And I thought, you know what? They're not knocking on the door. I'm just going to make my own stuff. I'm going to make what I like, what I think an audience will like and watch. And if I put all that into it, like I did with Mosquito and the other independent movies, there'll be an audience, And so that's what I'm doing. I'm just saying, I'm making my stuff. Now, if I get a call tomorrow from Warner Brothers, and they go, hey, it's a $100 million movie, you're going to make, $900,000 to direct. Yeah, I might fit it in my schedule.
Sign me up, right? Yeah.
But I'm being realistic. It'd be great to have $1 million, million or two to make movies. But so yeah, I just doing my own thing. I'm going to put my stamp on the movie. It's a Gary Jones film. This is what they are. You like it or you don't. I know there's a fan base out there somewhere, and if I'm making it just for them, they're going to tell me how much I should spend and what to do. So.
I got one more of your past movies to ask you about. And my dad and I, we had this tradition when I was growing up every year or sometimes 5 times a year. I didn't realize that, putting 5 movies out in a year didn't necessarily mean quality, but that's fine. But we'd always go see Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. And one of my favorite Jean-Claude Van Damme movies is Hard Target. What was your experience like working on that?
Oh, that was great. And that was another case where, I had done Army of Darkness, and Rob Tapper called me up and he goes, Hey, buddy, we're going to make a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie down in New Orleans. And we'd like you to, you want to join the crew and work with the special effects team and do special props. And Dale Martin was the head effects guy, pyro guy in that. He had done RoboCop and Rambo. And I was ecstatic to go work with him because I knew he was going to pull in with his big semi truck. And this is like real Hollywood effects guys, right? They got a semi loaded with all the toys, Zerk hit guns and squibs. And my job was to come in and basically be an assistant and work on, for whatever, but then make any special props. Like there was cemetery statue heads that we made out of plaster that would get blown up, wouldn't hurt anybody. I made rubber props that people could get hit with, things like that. So that was I was brought in to do that. But I told Dale, I go, Dale, man, I love running the squid boards, and I have no problem hiding in the car with 2 or 3 squid boards and the headset on and just raking the nail boards, just blowing the shit out of the car, And so he goes, all right. So he tried me out on one scene and he's like, all right. Well, Van Damme at that point, he was really at the top, right? Mm-hmm. He was okay, but he was cold, he's very short with people. And so they put me on the squid board to chase the squibs as he's running. The squibs are going off by him. And so he'd come over and go, hey, buddy, don't hit me with any of those friggin' squibs. I don't want to get hit. I don't want to get my ass burned on, And I could tell they put me on the squid board for this. I'm like, I looked around. I'm like, I get it. I'll be the first to go. Right. But Dale gave me the shot and I just, I chased Van Damme with him and, led right behind him. Was all said and done. Van Damme goes, hey, good, man. I didn't feel anything. I go, perfect. And so I got to run the squid boards. John Woo was a prince. He'd walk into a room like this room and he'd say, 30 squibs, fireball, sparks, 20 bullet hits. And we'd put tape marks on the wall. We had colored tape. Yeah. He'd just walk around and say where he wanted stuff. And he'd leave, and then we'd have 150 things to rig. They'd go shoot another scene, and we'd wheel our taco carts in. And we were ordering, squibs were coming in every day through through Federal Express. And we just, we drill holes, load up the room with squibs, patch stuff, spark things, run all the wires, we'd have 5 of us scrambling. Then they'd come on the set and we just run it all, and it was great fun. I mean, it was just it was sort of like a dream come true. I grew up watching all these war movies with my dad, and I was always fascinated at the ground explosions and the bullet hits. And, I had practiced those when I was a kid back in the late 60s, early 70s with my own concoctions, I still have all my fingers, so
so far.
It was just great to work with all the real Hollywood stuff, and with Dale Martin and Joel Quinlan, who these guys have been doing this forever. I learned all the tricks. I got to rig det cord in a building to blow up bombs in a car. I mean, and we're in New Orleans, right? So we're working with John Woo, right, who's a prince. You had Van Damme, who's really cool, and Lance Hendrickson, who's like the best of all. And we're rigging stuff all day and blowing things up. And at night, we're going and getting, drive-through margaritas and eating in New Orleans the best food. I mean, I was kind of in heaven. We had 8 weeks there, 9 weeks, and it was and I love the movie because it's just we blew everything up, and it was just a great time, and I really enjoyed being an effects guy on that, not, I love directing and making movies, but sometimes I enjoy stepping back. Somebody else has that burden and I get to just rig things and make things happen, and so that was a kind of a dream come true job for me. And of course I got to watch John Woo and like, what's he doing? He just puts cameras everywhere. So that's your secret as a director. You put 15 cameras.
Well, catch everything.
Yeah. Well, then we go watch the dailies. I'm like, I'm not sure. Then I'd see the cut and I'm like, that camera's running, but it's only good for that moment. Mm-hmm. He knows the moments he wants. And since you're blowing everything up and it's going to take 8 hours to redo it all, he's getting the pieces he needs so that if he has to go again, he can just do smaller sections. So it's not like he put 8 cameras and everything, but he put a lot of cameras on when we were doing a lot of stunts and action and pyro. I learned a ton of stuff from him just watching that. I'm like, okay, that's the key. You're blowing something up, every camera you can get a hold of, because you never might not be able to do it again.
Yeah. So just real fast, I see that you worked on From Dusk Till Dawn. What was that like? We're in the Halloween season. I think it's great to learn about that. Dusk
Till Dawn was great. I mean, that was at that time I was working for K&B Effects. I was out in California. We had done Army of Darkness, and I hadn't really done my first movie yet. And Bob Kurtzman had written a script called Dusk Till Dawn. And about a year or so earlier, he'd sent me the script, and Bob was going to direct it. And he wanted me to come out and do miniatures for it. And but anyways, I was out in LA after Army of Darkness and stuff. And through a series of events, Quentin Tarantino had written the original script. And then Quentin got the project back, and then it got moved over to Robert Rodriguez. And then Bob was the producer on it, and K&B did all the effects. So Bob had me come in there, and I got to make all kind of props, like the band, when they're playing all the human instruments. I got to make a bunch of those.
That's awesome.
I worked in the shop in there just making things. And that's kind of how I started doing rubber masks and severed heads and gore makeups and stuff. So a lot of latex and foam latex was kind of how I started early, and, squibs and pyro and miniatures. So it was great. I just worked in the shop. I never went to set on that, but I got to be in the shop making all these things and then rigging things ready to get blown up, and so it was a lot of fun, a lot of work, round the clock stuff. Cause it was like everything in the kitchen sink is in that movie, but no, it was good. It was a good time, but I never got to go to set, which was kind of a bummer.
Yeah, that sucked. But it sounds super cool to build all that stuff, though. That was really cool.
Oh, it was great. And especially now when I watch it, I go, I made that. It's 2 seconds of glory, but it's pretty cool.
First off, everybody check out Escape from Death Block 13. Where can everybody find the movie, Gary?
So we're coming out on November 2nd. And let me pull up my little cheat sheet here. I actually just got this in. So we are going to be everywhere. Dish Network, Direct TV, all the on-demand stuff, Comcast, Spectrum, Cox, Time Warner, Amazon, Vudu, Xbox, Google Play, iTunes. So everywhere where it's all on TVOD, wherever transactional is. So this is like the first go where everybody will pay for it, at whatever venue whatever they like to use. So whatever your cable station is, if you have your cinema channels, it's going to be there. I know we'll get a lot of play on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon. You'll be able to pay for it. So that'll be the first leg of it. That starts November 2nd. And then the 23rd will be on DVD in Walmart, Amazon, and DVD will get blasted everywhere. And, you can get it online at Best Buy. And a lot of times the stores don't have it in the store, but any like Target will have it on their online stores. So November 2nd is all the on-demand. And then the 23rd, the DVD is available. And we actually just got done with I did about a month run with some theatrical on the film. We got a couple of drive-ins. We actually run a double bill with the Many States of Newark up in Michigan at one of the biggest drive-ins in the country. And that'd
be cool. I bet that was really sweet.
That was great. I went up there and it was like, 200-foot screen. We got the lounge chairs out in the boom box,
cool.
Beer, and we watched, the Sopranos movie, and then our movie came right up. I mean,
couldn't beat it.
It was great. And as a double feature, I wanted to be the second movie.
Yeah.
Because it was like you'd go, I grew up going to these movies, and invariably as a kid, it would be the Disney movie. The parents would go to sleep. And then there would be Easy Rider or Bonnie and Clyde would come up. And as a kid, I'd wake up and watch bits of those movies as a little kid, So I was like, I'd be on the double bill, man. You're the second feature.
Mm-hmm.
That's the gritty one, right? That's the grindhouse movie.
Right. That's the one the adults are watching.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was very cool. So we went through our theatricals. So we're actually coming out in all the foreign countries too. We've got like England and Scandinavia and Thailand and Malaysia. It's starting to roll out there too. So after November 2nd, you won't be able to escape from Block 13.
It's a good tagline.
Yes. Everybody check it out. I cannot wait to check it out. And I will definitely be buying a DVD copy of it and adding it to my collection because cool. You sold me when you said 70s, 60s action, and I'm all in because I love.
Yeah, and the trailer's out now, and the Red Band trailer is going to drop like today or tomorrow. So whatever you see in the trailer today, you're going to be able to see the business end late, in the next trailer. If someone's shooting a gun now, you're going to see what they're shooting at and what happens in the next one. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So I'm really excited. It's and I'm going to start making more of these. This is like I think I've got a niche here, which is forget about the technology a bit, and go with just characters and code of honor. Movies about a code of honor, something we've lost.
For sure.
It's like all the lawyers and deal memos and contracts. It's like whatever happened to like, hey, handshake deal.
Mm-hmm. So real quick, where can everybody find you on social media?
So you can go to deathblock13.com, which is our website. We're on Facebook at deathblock13. You can find me, and I'm on Facebook, Gary Jones Director on Facebook. And at some point here, when I get a little time, I will revamp my Gary Jones Director website with all my stuff on it. And I'll be having posters and signed DVDs and T-shirts. I'm going to have all the merch stuff going soon. And we've got a comic book in the works and a novelization of the movies in the works. So yeah, we're really going to kind of put it out there and just get as much out there with it. And then of course we're kind of working on the 4K version with all the making of how we made the movie, all the behind the scenes craziness. And that's going to be a big deal for next year too.
That's awesome.
Everybody make sure you go check out all of that stuff. Follow us at 3 Geeks Podcast and have a great night. Hit that subscribe and like button.